Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We've got a lot of material to go through this afternoon, so we'll probably just get right into this. Could we have the next slide, please? We sent out written guidance, which I'm sure all of you have seen by now, for kind of a return to campus operations. And one of the things that was pretty clear to us when the team that Dean Kreitz put together looked at this was that a single prescriptive instruction isn't gonna work. There are too many differences between different offices and parts of our operations. So instead of that, we try to give you some guide rails within which to operate, a couple of examples, and then each unit leader, that means every department chair, every director, if you were responsible for people and space and operations, you'll come up with your own work safe plan and then submit that. Until we have a vaccine, we're going to have to adapt to changing risk levels. So trying to take that into account in your planning as much as possible. And when we are trying to decide at what risk level we're operating, obviously the most important aspects are the local transmission of disease and the impact on El Paso's healthcare system, which we monitor daily. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. Seems to be bouncing back and forth to me. Could I have the matrix, please? That one. There we go. This is based on the Centers for Disease Control, and it was one of the first pieces of work that Dean Kreitz and his team put together. Currently, we are on restricted campus operations. Essential personnel identified by name are working on campus, and everyone else is working remotely. We are testing out some limited campus operations to work out kinks and to figure out our planning. But right now we're at restricted campus operations. The transmission characteristics and the indicators are based on CDC guidelines. And as I mentioned, we monitor these daily, looking for the trends to be able to shift back to either limited campus operations or low density operations, and ultimately to be able to ultimately open up the campus again. That matrix was available and was passed around and attached to the memorandum that we sent. Next slide, please. So what are the general principles behind all of this, and for you when you do your planning? Continuing our mission. Our mission is important. We teach, we do research and advanced knowledge, we serve the community in which we live. And each of you has a different part of supporting that mission. So figuring out how we can continue our mission while we also cope with the pandemic. We want to protect the health and safety of our students, our faculty, and our staff. And that in each unit is going to vary, and with each one of the people that you supervise is going to vary. We wanted to give campus departments flexibility to look at what they have to do and the piece of the mission that they do, and give you flexibility to figure out how to get the job done without being too prescriptive, but to give you some flexibility for the mixture, for example, of remote and on-campus operations. Modify your workspaces, do schedule variations. And it's not to tell you you must use these things, but that these are available to you to be creative, to get the mission done while also protecting health and safety. And finally, we're going to have to monitor and adapt to changing levels of disease. So agility as we go through this and as we put our plans together is an important part of what we're trying to do by approaching it this way. Next slide, please.
As Dr. Wilson said, each leader will develop a work safety plan. One of the things we realized is the diversity that we centrally couldn't do this, and so we're trusting all of you to kind of develop these plans. Drafts of these plans are due by June 15th, and then they should be submitted in the normal chain of command to the Vice President by June 30th. We separated drafts in the final plan because a lot of the things we're asking people to do are relatively simple if you've been paying attention to the news: 6-foot distancing, face coverings, etc. A lot of the hard work is going to be in how do we do these types of things? How do we make sure that everyone's doing this and washing their hands? So we think that you'll benefit from talking with one another, for supervisors to look at different plans, share ideas. The other thing we have planned for are buildings, the building safety plan. So there are many buildings across campus where there might be 2, 5, or 10 units in those buildings. And the building plans will deal with the common areas, entryways, elevators, restrooms, etc. Seek input from others, share your plans, share drafts of plans. If you are a supervisor and approving plans and you see good ideas, let other ones know about those. Next slide. In your plans, we should talk about protecting vulnerable. If you look at the CDC guidelines and the memo that President Wilson sent around, there's some vulnerable groups that we've identified. A very important thing that we all need to start doing is emphasizing that when people are sick, they need to stay home. We have to kind of get a culture of protecting others and making sure people aren't coming in. If the symptoms are related to COVID, we're asking everyone to self-isolate and get tested before they return to work. Testing should be free now and available to people. Every employee is going to get training on COVID-19 symptoms, how to protect themselves, types of things to do. We're working on that. We're going to be maintaining 6-foot distance in about everything we do, from office spaces to classrooms, as we move forward until we get to kind of a later in the matrix when everything's open. And finally, face coverings are going to be required for much of the time we're doing this. Next slide. The plan should also discuss cleaning, supplemental cleaning. So there'll be kind of the traditional cleaning, the office cleanings, but we need people to think about common touch areas, doorknobs, copy buttons, those types of things where people can do some supplemental things. One of the recommendations is when you go to use something, clean it beforehand. When employees are sick, they should let their supervisors know about this. This is going to be important as we move forward and start dealing with small outbreaks and kind of tracing what's happening. So even if it doesn't seem that severe at the time, it's best to let people know so that if anything comes up, we have a good idea of what's going on. Supervisors can inform EH&S about this at the sites there. When people come into your space, we want you kind of to track employees and visitors in the event that we need to kind of go back later and assess any contact tracing types of things. And we are currently working on signage that will help be common across campus and will let people know what to do. Next slide.
Good afternoon. I want to talk just a bit about the plan for fall courses. Dr. Kreitz and his task force have been very busy trying to plan for a fall schedule that's going to be different than we've ever done the fall. As many of you know, just putting together a fall schedule under the best of conditions can be a challenge. And what they're faced with now is trying to redo the schedule while getting some input from faculty, some input from chairs, some input from deans, some input from students. And they've done an amazing job of getting that input, and they're going to have to make some decisions. Already have made some decisions. They're going to have to put all of that together very soon in order to get information out to faculty and to students before the end of June. What we have to do is maximize options with the safety constraints that we have. So if you could move to the next slide, please. Along with the academic plans for the fall, student services, student affairs has been busy planning for the fall semester as well. They're doing all they can to put things online, and they're building safety plans for those buildings that they primarily control, the Union Recreation Center and the Mike Loya Center. We also have a team that's developing a plan for residential life, and they're taking advantage of a lot of the best practices information that's being shared across the UT system and more broadly nationally. These issues that we're facing in El Paso have we have our own spin on them, but these are issues that people are, as you know, are grappling with nationally, and I think all of us can benefit a lot from learning from our colleagues at other institutions. I know Student Affairs is doing that, and we're doing that in Academic Affairs. Next slide. So I think we wanted to go ahead and move directly into questions that you all sent in. I think some of these questions have been combined just for time's sake. We had a lot of questions come in this time, so we want to move through these with some efficiency here. If you don't have your question answered, go ahead and send those questions to the link on the chat. But the first question here is, would the university help us purchase better computers or laptops and software to support teaching online for the coming fall semester? Obviously a question from the faculty. I have talked with our vice president, our interim vice president for information resources, Guadalupe Valencia Scanes, and I know she is working on a plan to find funding for some additional faculty computers. That said, if you have not yet taken advantage of the resources in your own department, I'd encourage you to do that. We've talked before about the fact that with the appropriate approvals, you can go ahead and take a desktop from your office if you need to do that. Several people in our office have done that. If you don't have the resources within your department, then it would be important to talk to your technology implementation manager at the college level and see what may be available to help you there. And if they don't have those resources, then calling the help desk and talking to tech support would be the next step. And I know Lupe is working that at Information Resources. Next slide. Synchronous versus asynchronous course delivery. Can you please clarify whether faculty have the option of teaching their summer and fall semester online courses synchronously versus asynchronously? You know, there've been a lot of conflicting messages on this topic, and I apologize for the confusion. I'd like to clarify that now, and then also before the end of the week, we'll be sending some clarifying information out to faculty. I think some of this confusion probably is a result of some early comments that I made in the spring semester. Sorry about that, but I think our faculty need to use the best method for their students, and I don't think there's a blanket university-wide policy that's going to be best here. I did early on make some comments discouraging kind of big synchronous experiments by people who don't have much experience with online learning. That's a rough way to get started online. As you all know, glitches happen, and they happen on the part of the faculty who are trying to adapt. And also, they happen for our students who didn't necessarily sign up for online learning. So we need to be cognizant that of a couple of things. I think first of all, we can't just switch to online and teach the same way we've always taught. It's not going to be sufficient just to record our lectures or to lecture to a laptop. That doesn't come across the same way online. And we also need to be really cognizant of the challenges that our students have with the speed of their computers, whether they have a computer, whether they are borrowing a computer, whether they have a quiet space at home that they can depend on, whether they have good internet access and so forth. So if you are choosing to use some synchronous work, and I think that there are obviously places where that's ideal for our students. They need to have some interaction with faculty. And if you're choosing to do that, I want to ask you to take those factors into account when you do that. What about time of day for your students who, for instance, may be not in the continental US? Communicate with students and make sure that you're accommodating ADA guidelines, that you're communicating well with your students, and that you give them an asynchronous option when it's possible to do that. Taking all those things into account, I think you've got to make the best decision for you and your students. And like I said, we'll send some more clarifying information out later this week to all faculty about this topic and some other things around fall teaching. Next slide.
So at what threat level are we currently? The email is a matrix, but where are we right now? And where are we right now is over on that far left of that diagram. We are in restricted operations. The plans that we've asked you to come up with is for the next level up, which is not indicated by the public health data at the moment to go to that level. So we are at restricted operations, and we're testing out some of our next level of operations. Next slide, please.
Okay, this question's about when the training's coming out. When I see this question, I can't help think I was talking with a friend once and said, you know, I always get in trouble with my wife because I'll tell her something's going to be ready in 2 weeks and it takes me a month to get it done. The aspect with this one is we had the training, we had the slides ready, but we looked at it and thought this could be better. And one of the things that we're doing on the task force is we're reaching out to other people for help. There's not enough of us on the task force, and there's lots of great people out there, and this is a good example of that. Just yesterday, Dr. Richard Pineda agreed to kind of help and make this better, and I think that it'll be ready in a few days. You know, sometime next week we should have it. With compliance training, will there be different modules? Right now, we are working on a very general module for faculty, staff, employees, and there's also a student module that we're going to be working on as well. That a student is actually driving that one and putting that one together. Will the training include computer lab operations? The training is going to be very general about the types of things that we need to do. All of the, you know, specific things within buildings, within computer labs or teaching labs or research labs, those will be addressed in the work study plans we talked about before. So we'll give you general guidelines, and then in work study plans, we'll ask you to kind of think about how these guidelines apply to your individual areas. Next slide. For buildings that are in, when we have multiple units in one building, how does this work? So every unit, every leader is going to have to develop the work safety plan for their unit, and then buildings will have the common plan. So in buildings like Kelly Hall, which is the next question, there are a number of space stewards in that building. What they will need to do is kind of work together and develop a plan. You know, so one person can kind of take the lead, share it with everyone, and develop a plan for that building. And the last question is, can we do joint work safety plans for areas that are closely together? I mean, I think that that's a great idea. I mean, we want to be looking at these plans, sharing plans, making sure that we're all attending to the things we have to do to stay safe. So the only issue here might be that if you have different units that are working on a plan and one has to go to the vice president of business and the other one academic affairs, you would submit them separately. But the more that we can work together and help each other, the better. Next slide.
So this question has to do with core research facilities, and those would be those that are shared by multiple researchers. What are the guidelines or policies for opening core facilities for research? So each of these, you know, some of those core facilities are already open and people are working in them. I know the one in biology is, for instance, but each of these core facilities has a custodian. Each one belongs within a department or unit. And so in those cases, it will be the responsibility of that custodian, the person who runs the unit through to which that core facility reports, to develop a safety plan for the facility and share that with potential users. And then that'll go up through the regular reporting chain for approval.
So with respect to remote work, once the campus is open, taking all the recommended precautions, would it be mandatory for those with no restrictions to come back to the office, or would they be allowed to choose for themselves whether to keep working from home or to go to the campus offices. And what if a person doesn't have an underlying condition but refuses to come back? So we put in place a temporary remote work policy that required all of you to sign off, and we're trying to make that policy permanent with some minor changes. Once we get back to full open campus operations, someone would not be able to work away from their normal assigned place of work without your approval as a supervisor. So if someone doesn't want to come back to work for a legitimate health or safety reason, we'd encourage you to work with that employee. But when we get back to open campus operations, just because someone likes working remotely doesn't mean that it works for you as the supervisor trying to get all the work done. And so it is by mutual agreement, and that has to be signed off by you as the supervisor. And then also the policy is that it can be revoked by the university at any time. Next slide, please.
Hello, everybody. So the questions come up related to children and childcare. If an employee or student without childcare insists upon bringing their child to the office or to the classroom, is this going to be allowed, and under what guidelines will UTEP suggest for this? So we recognize that children in particular tend to come in contact with many people and have behaviors that often lead to the child touching many things and surfaces. This creates a risk for everybody in the space. Also, under our limited low and medium density level within the risk matrix, we must be restrictive to the number of people within our campus spaces. And therefore, we can't just invite additional people into the space at the leisure of the students or the staff members. Therefore, we cannot permit children in our office and teaching environments. If childcare cannot be arranged by an employee or student, then they must make some other arrangements to do their work from home. Next slide, please.
So this question asks, under what circumstances are students allowed to visit departments on campus, meaning what constitutes an essential visit? I think if a student is availing themselves of a service that's open on campus, that student's allowed to come to campus, right? I don't think we're going to be forbidding students to visit departments that are open on campus. How can, or when can student employees come back is another question. And I think student employees are employees, and I don't think we're going to make a distinction between student employees and other employees. I think we need to make sure that our workplaces are as safe as possible for all employees, and that'll include our students. Has the protocol for coming onto campus changed, or is it the same? And this asks about dean's approval, contacting police, screening, etc. The protocol for coming onto campus currently has not changed. If people need to come onto campus to take things from their office for working at home, if they're engaged in essential work related to distance education and so forth, if they have keys to the facility they need to access, they need to come in and observe safety protocols on the way in and on the way out. If they don't have keys to the facilities they need, that would be when they would contact the police, who can facilitate that entry, and we'll ask them questions about screening and so forth. But that protocol at the moment has not changed, and won't change until we move to that next risk level according to the matrix that we've discussed. Next.
So the date for the plans, when is the effective date for the plans that we will submit to our respective VP? There's actually it's not written necessarily for a particular date, because we don't know when the risk level is going to change. We're currently at restricted operations. We're asking you to come up with your plans so that when we're able to shift to the next level, all plans are ready and we'll know what to do. And we hope to be able to give people, we're not going to say, oh my gosh, tomorrow we're going back to campus at a modified risk level. We'll try to give people a heads up and do this in a reasonable way. Let me just add one thing to the question that John just asked, and it may have been because we sent out examples, including the example from the president's office that included that our student workers in the president's office wouldn't be coming back at the moment. And that was really because of a distancing issue and a space issue in our office. It wasn't because of their status as student employees. And as we work through this and tried some things out, we actually think we are going to bring back our students by adjusting our modified schedule. So that confusion may have been from our example of a plan. Next slide, please.
So the question is, are all student computer labs going to be reopened? Well, yes, ultimately we will open those labs. It is our expectation that when the campus moves to the low density operations level, the remaining computer labs will all be reopened. That essentially is when we're back to entertaining students in the classroom spaces. When this happens, access will be limited by the available space using social distancing guidelines within those computer labs. So disinfecting wipes will be made available at the room entrance for use at the computer workstation when you sit down at the computer workstation. Next slide. Okay, what is the plan for AC within facilities in terms of return to work, timelines, etc., and will water fountains be off limits? As departments reoccupy campus buildings, facility services will be notified by work order of the reopening date for that particular building so that the building air conditioning can be turned on. During the initial campus and limited campus and low density operations, use of drinking fountains will be discouraged. However, instead of making them off limits, as the question asked, we will encourage the use of refillable drinking bottles. Next question.
So this is about the building stewards in classrooms. The one thing that I can say here, or multiple things, is one where Dr. Wiebe kind of suggested that by the end of June we would like to have a definitive plan. But you can start planning even before then. We have information about how many students will fit in each classroom, and you can probably assume that through most of the day these classrooms are going to be full with the number that can fit in that. Especially the larger classrooms that normally hold, 50 and more people. So you can kind of start planning on that. The other thing that I will say about this is that we really need help from all the faculty on this conversion process. We are looking at 4,000 courses, scheduled courses that we need to start converting to synchronized online, asynchronized online, hybrid. We've already sent out a few questionnaires. There's another one coming, and it's very important for us to get information. When you say that you're having a hybrid course and your course normally meets Tuesdays and Thursdays, we need to know, are you meeting every Tuesday? Are you meeting every 2 weeks? That type of thing is what we're going to need in order to get the schedule pinned down. So please just, help us by responding quickly to these surveys, and the sooner that we get them in, the faster we will have definitive plan. Next slide.
All right, this question asks about hosting courses off campus in a local shelter. Would I be able to return to this teaching venue anytime soon? I think these are the sorts of things that are unique department by department, and there's no way to really come up with this. This is one of the reasons why a place as diverse as the university, there's no way to come up with a central plan for coming back. if in a situation like as unique as this, I think it's up to the instructor to come up with a safety plan for how this might be accomplished. If you think it can be accomplished safely, I'd go ahead and put that plan together and work it through the reporting chain, and we'll take a look at that. I think it's going to be quite difficult. I think I'm familiar with the program here. I think it'd be quite difficult to do that in the foreseeable future. But I'm certainly happy to look at plans if people want to advance those, if they have ideas about how it could be done safely. Next slide. Yeah.
The interdisciplinary research building, which I was over walking around campus for those of you who haven't been able to get there recently, and it looks beautiful, and the outside landscaping is done and the fences are down and so forth. The real challenge, though, is that the company making the furniture has stopped production because of COVID-19. So we have a delay in the arrival of the furnishings for inside the building. We don't expect those to be available probably until September. So the building won't be opened until we have the furniture for it in September at the earliest. Next slide, please.
So the questions about our students being asked about this, and the answer is yes. With the help of Roy Matthew and SERP, we sent a survey to every student who was enrolled in the spring, planning to roll in the fall, and I think even incoming students. As of a few seconds ago, when I refreshed my page, over 2,070 students have replied to that survey. And it's asking questions about, what's their preference? Do they want to be online, face-to-face, a mixture? It's looking at things about, what are the impediments that they have? Do they have problems with internet access or computer problems, or is crossing the border an issue? Do they have healthcare issues? So yes, we have a survey of students and thus far have a pretty good response rate. And that will be shared with, deans in the near future, and we'll use that to help us shape as we move forward. Next slide.
This question asks about, again, a sort of a specific type of event that people are trying to schedule in a department, a HOPE event for members of the homeless community for the fall. And the question is whether we think it might be possible or whether it should be rescheduled. Unfortunately, I don't know that I've got any better perspective on what will happen in October than the author of the question. And so I think this is, again, where we have to start moving responsibility for many of these decisions to the organizers. In this case, again, I would say think through how this might be accomplished in a safe way, depending on where we are in the risk matrix. If there's just too much uncertainty about that for you to really feel comfortable spending a lot of time planning for it, it may be a good idea to reschedule it. If you can think of enough flexible ways to accomplish that, you think it's worth spending the time to plan it, I'd go ahead and do that and submit a safety plan for that event. But unfortunately, I'm not sure that I can foresee the future any better than anybody else on the call today. So we'll do our best to facilitate and help. But I think all we can do is ask you to be as flexible as you can in your planning. Next slide.
So for instructors who are teaching, do they need to wear face masks? One thing to consider is if you look at the matrix, what we're really talking about is low density operations. Under limited campus operations, we're limiting sizes to 10 people. Low density increases to 50, and we can start having normal classrooms with 6 feet separation. The classes that are returning to campus, whether face-to-face or hybrid, people are going to have safety plans for those with regard to the classes. There'll probably be a relatively common format that all of us can do, but we'll need people's help in looking at this. The best case would be for everyone to wear face masks if you can. We can try to get microphones and equipment in there to make sure that that will work. But if there's aspects about that classroom that would make it safe to avoid face masks if they can't be used, face coverings, we would consider that in a work safety plan. Next slide.
Robert, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Okay, so building ventilation. The question comes up about social distancing and compliance. When we have social distancing compliance, everybody can see that, but how will we know if there's sufficient quality of ventilation within the spaces where we work, meet, or teach? How is UTEP addressing proper circulation of air in the buildings? So Facility Services has been adjusting its programming for the HVAC systems of the campus in order to allow for greater outside air mix into the buildings whenever possible, and to the extent that comfortable temperatures can be maintained. And they are committed to providing a comfortable space for people, but it also will be safe. Next slide.
So the question comes up about face coverings and how will we enforce the rule that says that we're going to be wearing face coverings on campus, particularly if someone is non-compliant with it. So none of us like wearing face coverings. I suppose surgeons or somebody get used to wearing face coverings, but they're hot, they're uncomfortable, but we don't wear them for ourselves. We wear them for each other, because a face mask protects you from me if I am sick but asymptomatic. That's one of the awful things about this disease. So we're trying to create a culture where we take care of each other in the same way that we're a non-smoking campus. We're a non-smoking campus to protect others. And so in some ways it's a little bit like we're trying to treat it like being a non-smoking campus, wearing a face covering, or almost the next step from no shirt, no shoes, no service. This is not some individual statement. This is just a very practical way in which we protect each other. And I think talking about it in that way, we will have everyone in their package. When we have a startup package from facilities, we'll have some extra disposable face masks for those who forget them. But if it's really a situation where somebody is refusing to use one and will not be persuaded, we're actually expecting some additional guidelines from the UT system as to how we can enforce this. In particular, can we enforce it in the same way that we enforce our no smoking policy? Thank you. Next slide.
People observe with symptoms. So what's the full protocol in case a student, staff, or visitor is seen to have some symptoms of COVID-19? Who do we contact? Do we address the situation with the individual directly? Which department should be contacted to disinfect the area? And do we need to evacuate the area while it's being disinfected? So in answer to that question, I want to say this. When classes in business operations first resume, faculty and supervisors really need to be very clear with all of those under their charge. They need to be clear that nobody should report to campus with illness symptoms. If anyone is observed with obvious symptoms, they should be expected to leave immediately. Other arrangements can be made so that they can get their work and their studies done. They don't have to be on campus. If someone under your charge is known to have COVID-19, then notify EH&S by an email to covidaction@utep.edu. Provide the individual's name and contact information for follow-up. If the case ends up being a confirmed COVID-19 infection, we'll begin contact tracing for that individual, and area disinfection practices may be warranted if the person had been on campus recently. Next question.
So visitor sign-in, the question about the plans, the example plan from the president's office involves signing in to support future contract tracing. And how would this work for buildings that have multiple entry points and no staff member stationed there? This really is an office by office thing. Think about it, the administration building has multiple offices in it. But what we're trying to do is facilitate tracking if someone is subsequently diagnosed. Did they go to your office? So even down to the individual office, just keeping track of somebody who came into your office as a faculty member over time. And it doesn't have to be all that formal. In our office, there is a front desk, and so there's a way for the person at the front desk to just kind of keep this running tally every day, so that if we need to, we can go back and look at that. But if a faculty member wants to do it even for their own personal office and just keep track on their daytimer or on their schedule in some way, that's fine. It's just a way in which to do contact tracing after the fact without having to rely on memory, as the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. Next slide, please.
Okay, so cleaning of classrooms and offices. Let me start with the offices first. I mean, I think one of the things we're all going to realize is how much our normal lives change. And, if you're a faculty office and you're the only one in the office, the normal cleaning is going to be sufficient. One of the things I think is going to start happening is we're going to start having more meetings over Teams and things like that. Even if someone's across the, down the hallway from you, it's going to be safer to kind of just, log on to Teams and have a virtual meeting with them. The cleaning classrooms is ones that we're working on right now, and this is one of the reasons we need to see what the next semester is like, how much time we'll have between courses, and so forth as far as the cleaning. We have some initial numbers. It's going to be very, very expensive and probably not feasible to have a long gap between classes so a person can come in and kind of clean all of them. We might have to move to some different models, more like what happens in gyms or something like that, is we have cleaning things available for people that they can do cleaning. We don't know the answer to this one yet. We're currently exploring different models and how that's going to be possible. Next slide.
So the question about cleaning supplies and face masks. I'm going to handle these individually. Are cleaning and protective supplies going to be provided to the college, and what is the plan for ensuring that supplies are always on hand? So initially, there's going to be a UTEP care package that will be provided to each department as they come back onto campus. The materials in the kit will include hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, paper towels, tissues, and a small supply of disposable surgical face masks for use in the event a visitor comes without one. These initial supplies can be replenished by signature at the facility services warehouse, where accounting records for the material will be maintained. The second question here is, why is the university not providing face masks for employees and visitors to wear during working hours? While the campus is in limited and low density operations, each person on campus will be responsible to wear a face covering while inside building. Employing departments will be assigned a sufficient supply of cloth face coverings to initially outfit employees, and employees will be responsible for the care and cleanliness of those face coverings. And they will have to replace them if they get lost or damaged. Next slide. Question about water system restart. Before reopening, will UTEP be sanitizing and flushing the water pipes, since leaving the buildings empty increases the risk for bacterial growth that causes Legionnaire's disease? While most of the buildings have been empty, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been some flow of water at the buildings to operate certain systems, whether it's the lawn service or something else. However, we do have plans already established to flush areas of buildings as they are brought back into service. And also, as large numbers of people are expected back onto campus, we plan to work with the water supply supervisor at the fire department to flush fire hydrants along the water mains servicing the campus. This will help to really circulate anything that's settled out in those larger pipes. Next slide.
Okay, so as President Wilson was talking about earlier, we're asking units to kind of keep logs of who's coming in. This is to help with contact tracing. I mean, nearly all of these diseases, if you go back, decades, they've been eliminated or reduced through contact tracing, and that's going to be important here. So if someone is diagnosed, I think that this will be an important aspect, and departments will be notified and asked to work to help identify who was in contact with whom, and so we can isolate and limit the spread of it. With regard to the doctor's note for employees and people coming, the aspect here will be to just work with HR. I mean, people may be out sick for different reasons. If someone kind of, has something that's not at all related to COVID, a broken bone, something like that, HR is an expert in dealing with these types of things and can work with units on that. Next slide.
So what types of safety measures are available for those who are not on the internal UTEP campus, but in places like University Towers and so forth? University Towers actually is a UTEP-owned building, and UTEP is responsible for the central cleaning there. So there's a building manager responsible for it. So that will have a work safety plan for University Towers for the common areas. Downtown, of course, we do, the College of Business does need some space in a building downtown for its executive MBA programs and some of its other courses. There is a building manager at that site as well. And there's also external access there. There are some jointly used elevators and things, but that building manager will come up with the plan for those who work in that facility. Those are the two that I could think of that were not completely UTEP-oriented facilities. If you have another one where your department is leasing space somewhere, go ahead and if you get some specific questions, certainly contact Environment Safety and Health or address it in your work safety plan that you need to coordinate with someone. But those are the two that I'm familiar with. Next slide, please.
This question's about the fall calendar and whether we're considering altering that in ways that some other institutions have altered theirs. Questions about starting earlier in August and ending at Thanksgiving. And I think a lot of places are considering doing this for several reasons. One is that many places have a longer break than we do. They take a full week at Thanksgiving. Many have students who tend to travel much more over that break, partly because it's longer, partly because they tend to travel more in general. And there's a lot of concern about students coming back from Thanksgiving travels and getting back into courses on campus and possible risk associated with that, along with, I think, just the elevated risk of flu season and the possibility of an outbreak at that point in the semester. I think we're going to have to be vigilant all semester long and ready to turn on a dime. It's part of this flexible planning we've been talking about. We have been in conversations with the UT system, and this is going to be contained in some of the guidance that I'll send out this week to faculty, about classes after Thanksgiving. And I think we will need to complete all of our in-person, face-to-face meetings, if we're able to have those in the fall, before Thanksgiving. That we only have, if you take a look at the calendar, we only have a few days, I think about 3 days worth of classes after Thanksgiving break. And we're going to ask faculty to find ways to do those days by remote. At present, if we're still able to do in-person exams, there will be likely an option for those at the end of the semester, but I think we're going to have to be very flexible around examinations and plans for those in the coming semester. So we won't be starting earlier in August. I think that's just going to be untenable given how packed our schedules are, but we will ask faculty to try to front load any face-to-face contact or content in their courses in the semester so that we don't have students coming back to organized classes on campus after Thanksgiving. Next question.
So with respect, that's actually the previous one. You go forward.
So when can we start planning for courses being online? One of the things, it also talks about the language. One of the things to consider is the task force is sending out these questionnaires, and the task force is not an academic unit. I mean, the decisions about how courses should be offered in the normal procedure, this would go through a departmental committee and then the chair and the dean. So the task force is trying to be very careful because we shouldn't be changing classes, nor do we want to. Those decisions should be made by faculty about what's going to be best. What we're trying to do is put together this 4,000 piece jigsaw as we try to think about how we're going to take and shift these courses and what's going to fit and where can we put these. So that's been our task, and we've just been careful with the language there. I think that if you as a faculty member and your chair and dean are all comfortable, you can start planning online courses is the easy part, the one to plan. We're holding back on making an announcements until we can see how this entire jigsaw puzzle fits together and we can fit all the classes in and so forth for students. And again, there was guidance earlier that we're hoping to have this done by the end of June, beginning of July, where we can kind of unveil the schedule. Next slide.
This is a question about personal income tax implications working from home. I'm certainly not in a position to advise anybody about their taxes, and as an institution, we have to be really careful about that. I think if you do have concerns about your personal income taxes, it's really important to talk to somebody who's qualified to give that advice and who knows the specifics of your situation. So I would suggest that you consult with a tax preparer who is qualified to give you that advice. I don't know that we have anybody at UTEP looking into that, and I think there would be some unfortunate liability for the institution if we were to offer tax advice to our employees. Next slide.
Last question here was about the budget, and we did do a presentation on the budget, which was really focused on this year's budget, and John Wiebe and I did that. It seems like months ago now, but it wasn't. And the question really is about the FY21 budget that'll start on the 1st of September. We have another budget meeting. We're having budget meetings about weekly now to try to put together the details of the budget. We have another one this Friday, and as soon as we're ready to release details on that budget, we will be very transparent about it with the campus. Next slide. We managed to do this in less than an hour, which is probably an indoor record. And I hope we got you some answers that are useful to you. We also realized that in answering some of these questions, we may not have gotten exactly to what you wanted to know, or it may have provoked other follow-on questions. That email address, townhall@utep.edu, will stay monitored here at least daily, so that if you have a follow-up and you don't know who to send it to, go ahead and send it there. Or if it's something fairly specific and you can figure out who on campus might be the expert who knows the answer to that, go ahead and try to contact them directly. I know there's a heck of a lot of work involved in getting these plans together. I have touched base with some of our directors and department chairs to see how things are going, and people seem to be getting their arms around this and just making practical decisions about what the right thing is to do and how they can continue to conduct our mission while keeping everybody safe. And so I appreciate all the work that's going into this. It has been a remarkable 10 weeks of distance operations when everybody pitched in and helped each other. And I just wanted to reemphasize how much I appreciate everyone's flexibility and commitment to our students and our research and the mission. This university is essential to the students we serve and the region that we serve. And that's been evident to everyone around us over the last several months. So thank you for everything you're doing to serve the people of West Texas. Thank you very much. John or Stephen or Robert, do you have anything else?
Nothing other than just to thank people for the work that they've done and the flexibility that they've already exhibited here. We've accomplished an awful lot. There's a lot left to do as we think about the fall, and we're going to need a lot more of that flexible coping from everybody that's listening and all of the other folks at UTEP.
I would say the same thing. You know, we've reached out to dozens of people, faculty, staff, for help, and everyone has been wonderfully accommodating and been helping the task force in any ways that we needed. So thanks to all of you for doing that and for your continued support and understanding as we get through this. I mean, when you start looking at some of these questions, I know in some ways we maybe didn't answer all of your questions here. But you start to see how complex this aspect is, you know, as you try to mesh all of this back together and think how we're coming back. So be patient, we're working on it, and thanks again for your help.
All right, have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for all of the questions. There were some really good ones, and be safe out there.
Thank you all. Stay safe.